Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, we would like to open the discussions for our question and answer segment. And I'm sure that there are a lot of questions that you will have. So we will have that session now. So what we are going to do, we're going to have the questions for both sessions, both presenters now. And I have some questions here from Mr. Holt presentation. Mr. Holt, good morning again. Viewers online are asking some questions. First question for you. What are some of the complaints, feedback received from industries and employers on the use of the VR and AR methodology to establish job attitudes and skill competencies?
You know, not a lot of complaints, more skepticism because it's new. And that's natural human behavior is, when we introduce new methodologies and new training technologies, there's a skepticism of does it actually meet the intended outcomes? And so most of our employers and advisory groups are asking for, where's the proof? Show us the data that shows this work. Actually, we've received the introduction of AR and VR exceptionally well from industry advisory groups. But our job as educators and our job as accreditation bodies is to demonstrate to employers and industry advisory groups that the technology and the methodology that we've selected for training actually develops a learner. So we have to do that in a number of different ways. One of the challenges is right now, proof is still an assessment. And so we're still using very traditional methods of assessment. So a standard theoretical exam and then a standard practical exam at the end of conclusions, which are helpful to show the success of alternate training assessments. So when we're using AR and VR and the learner is still able to meet the requirements of the assessments, that bodes well for us.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holt. Another question for you, Mr. Holt, is that you made mention of making apprentices employable. Someone wants to find out what are some of the feedback received from industry again, or other stakeholders, and what specific areas are in demand at this time?
Well, I would say, making an apprentice employable, what we're hearing from employers and people who are hiring skilled workers is they're looking for people who not only competent in the trade or vocation, but who are critical thinkers and who are able to make a contribution and be individual contributors to the organization beyond just performing the tasks of the vocation. So what you'll see in our programs and what I hope other programs are doing is layering on, and I hate this word and I try not to use it, but I'll use this word first, soft skills, and I call them human skills, ensuring that our apprentices and our trainers are learning human skills to learn how to communicate effectively, to learn how to solve problems, to manage conflict, to work in teams. Those are skills that are just as important as the vocation or technical skills as possible. We have a lot of work in higher education and training institutions to ensure that we are graduating young learners with both technical and human skills so that they can be productive and creative. What was the second part of that question?
The second part wanted to find out what areas are in demand.
Area in demand. Right now, electrician is heavy in demand. Automotive service technician is heavy in demand. Heavy equipment technician is heavy in demand. Welding is one that, it's really hard to predict. It can be in demand for a few months and then it can dry right up. So we just announced our mountain gateway pipeline that goes from Alberta, straight west of Vancouver. So welders and fabricators and pipe fitters are back in demand. But that could dry up as quickly if that pipeline is delayed or stalled. But what is consistently in demand are automotive service technicians, heavy equipment technicians, electricians, industrial maintenance mechanics, instrumentation. But what we're also seeing is a shift from being a shift in demand from being a single ticket or journeyman to a multi-ticket or multiple journeyman skill set. Employers are looking for new employees who have a diversified skill set, who can work in multiple disciplines, so that as the economies change and their work demands change, they can shift people within the organization to different forms of work, as opposed to laying them off and hiring a separate skill set.
Okay, thank you. Another question. Skills development requires learners to practice to develop their psychomotor skills. What is the impact of COVID-19 in this regard?
Well, that's the biggest impact there is with our campus, and I'm sure other training institutions' campus being locked down or shut out because of COVID, the ability to develop those skills is limited. Now, that doesn't mean we don't have the opportunity to do those. It means we have to think about it differently, and maybe we have to break it down into smaller, more micro-credentialed aspects. What we're finding is many students during this time actually have access to some form of tools and areas outside of the training institution in which they can practice. What we have to do is create environments for them to practice them safely, to avoid injury, to reduce the risk, so that as they're doing them at home or in a workplace, that there is a virtual coach and mentor. And fortunately, because of technology, we are able to video conference into shops and employer settings or into home settings and be able to virtually coach those individuals. But nonetheless, it still is the biggest challenge. However, as you can see with those Miller augmented reality machines, you can develop the fine motor skills and psychometric skills of welding in a safe way that they can plug into their home into a 110 volt electrical outlet. So there are ways to do it. It just requires investment and creativity.
Okay, good. Thank you, Mr. Holt. Again, the COVID-19 has presented enormous challenge, which brings a lot of change to training systems. And within the training system, you will have your instructors, your trainees, and so on. How are they responding to the new normal and the changes that you are making at Red Deer College? Slowly.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a disruption, right? Like this is a new paradigm shift. This is I describe this here at institution. Training institutions, higher education has not faced a disruption like this since World War II. This has really changed the way we look at learning and developing. And so our instructors are needing a new skill set in teaching and learning that they haven't had to use, that they haven't had to employ before. They've always had the luxury of coming into a classroom, talking about the theory, working with the students, and then walking across to the shop and transforming those skills. Now we have to do this in a much different way, where they're communicating digitally in live online environments, where they're incorporating new technology. And like anything, like we're asking our trainees to do, we're asking them to learn a new skill set, and as instructors, we're being patient with those students as they're developing those skills. We as institutional leaders have to have the same patience with our instructors to develop new muscles in training and learning. And it would be foolish for us to think that they can be able to pivot instantly into this new reality if we don't make an investment and we don't invest and train our instructors to teach and develop content and programs differently for the future. We have to make that investment in our institutions and our people.
Okay, and a final question for you, Mr. Holt, is that in your presentation, you spoke about you must identify ways to bring learners to the campus. Online, VR, AR can't replace shop time. Can you elaborate on this first? And again, it goes back to that area of practice and the development of skills.
Yeah, sure. So, it can't replace it. It can enhance it and it can support it, but we still actually have to have trainees and students and learners time with the equipment, time with the technology, time on the machines, time practicing the procedures. We can't ask an automotive service technician to replace the brakes on a vehicle virtually, and then expect them to walk up to a vehicle and replace rotors and brakes in a safe way so that vehicle is roadworthy. So here at Red Deer College, we have a relaunch committee that we have formed that works with the Alberta Government of Health, that works with our senior leaders like myself, that create ways for students to come back onto campus in a safe way. So some of those things are our instructors and our program plan or our program coordinators have to develop a comprehensive shop and activity plan that demonstrates how long the student will be on campus, what will they perform, what is the capacity of the facility to have students in the shop to maintain 2 meters physical distance, to maintain proper COVID PPE, whether it's a personal face mask or face shield, sanitization of equipment and the training space between different cohorts of students. So this, you can imagine, this is no easy task, and it takes a lot of planning, and then that plan has to be approved by our college, and then we have to have that plan approved by the Ministry of Health from Alberta. Over the last 2 months, we've had successful plans approved, and we've returned students back. But what it looks like is a student, instead of coming to campus all day, may only come to campus for about 2 or 3 hours. And they'll come in a cohort size instead of a cohort size of 20 or 25. They're going to come in a cohort size of 10 or 12. And they're going to come in with that instructor. They're going to work. They're going to leave the shop. And then we have to sanitize the equipment and the training tools over a 2-hour period. And then we can bring another group in. And so it's very much rotational. It's not efficient. It's very expensive because we have to require all the cleaning and the staff to cleaning. But it's a commitment that we have to industry and to learners to ensuring that we continue to develop them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holt. Let me pass over a couple questions to the next presenter, Mr. Marquez and Mr. St. Clair. And in their presentation, they would have highlighted that their program runs for approximately 3.5 years. 1 year in the training facility and 2.5 years on the job training. While the presentation delved a lot into the training facility and so on, can you share some of the details on the structure of the on-the-job training and how it takes place in the work environment post-COVID-19?
Okay, good morning, everyone. The apprentices or trainees are assigned to trainee crews. The trainee crews have instructors who would have prepared both with regards to their skills in terms of passing on the knowledge of vocation, and also now, because of COVID, they have to also be to manage the interaction. These are apprentices based on the social distancing and so forth, and they ensure that they monitor their interaction so that we understand that the training objectives are met.
All right. So is there any particular structure or approach when the training goes on the job for training?
Right. There are a number of strict objectives. The training must go through these objectives. Generally, major practice initially is without electrician or even a linesman. Most of this major work is done initially with no supply, no electricity. Eventually, near the end of the program, he's brought in to do work on live electricity and so forth. But initially, his entire work is based on getting his motor skills in, using no live electricity.
Mr. Sedley, as you mentioned, high electricity and voltage and so on, it's a high-risk area. What sorts of precautions or safety guidelines are in place for apprentices or people who are being trained on the job in this area of work?
Right. So, as I indicated, initially, these trainees would be, we have model systems erected where the trainees, and you would have seen some of the pictures during the video, where the trainees are now allowed to learn how to climb. They then learn how to be comfortable at heights. then learn how to actually maneuver at heights. So the process is gradual. So again, because our industry, besides electricity, a lot of the employees have to work at heights. And within the place, those two things are what cause the major incidents and could lead to some fatalities. So we have to monitor to ensure that they are comfortable working at heights. If they are not, then we have to reassess the entire fitness of this training to continue the program and readjust and move or add.
If I may as well,
Sure.
The fact that this is a competency-based training program, each of those steps that Mr. Sinclair spoke about would be you need to pass it to move to the next phase. So you need to be competent at each level to get to the next phase. So it's a pile-on process to get you that competent linesman or electrician.
Mr. Marquez, as you mentioned, it is designed based on a competency model. With the impact of COVID, again, your duration would have been 3.5 years. Is it that your duration is going to remain 3.5 years, or would you see an extension to the duration because of the impact of COVID?
Right. We are hoping to do the training within the same period. As I said, it will be a trial and error situation because we're now going to start the process post-COVID. And we're hoping to do the online and these practical sessions in the same time, but probably just have different group sizes, do different applications, use online more. Maybe people will have to probably even do more hours, contact hours, because of the way the classes will be done. But I'm really hoping to still keep the 3.5-year program. But we will only know this as we get into the actual meat of it. But so far, it's not going to be longer than the 3.5 years.
All right. Again, like I asked Mr. Holt, based in Canada, and their training that is taking place at the college. At T&TEC, it brings a level of change into the organization. So your instructors, your supervisors on the job, even the apprentices, how are they responding? How are they responding to the new normal and the kind of changes and the impact that is taking place with the training?
Mr. Holt had said that they had a slow response.
Yes.
I don't want to say that because I think all people have actually adapted quite well and quite quickly. Of course, it's not 100% because it is a transformation. But we have had some quick adaptation into where we have to go. And we have the support, and even in the general working before training was done, while COVID was rampant, the work was being done, the adaptation of the employees going out there and getting the job done. The support was there. So we have taken it and started it thus far.
Okay, and on a final question again, what additional support has T&TEC provided to ensure that the quality of the training program remains?
We have our checks and balances. So in the craft training program, the competency-based training, we need to tick all the boxes as we go through. So the instructors are aware, and the method of training may have changed, but the end result of what we need to get into the competence has not changed. So the checks and balances are already built into the system to move forward.
A question for both Mr. Holt and Mr. Marquez. How are you providing guidance and counseling for trainees or apprentices within this COVID time?
So, well,
go ahead, Mr. Marquez.
So on our end, and you're talking about the apprentices and the
or trainees, as the case may be.
Right. So within this period, as I mentioned in my presentation, the instructors now have a more peer role. They are closely paired with the trainees, and they are basically more of a body system. And we do have also systems in place for employee assistance in case of any issues where they need to go for any type of psychological help. So we have that in place for them, but we also have a more mentor type relationship with the trainees at this point. So it's a closer knit relationship to assist them through this process, because it's not going to be easy to change how you did something a couple months ago to how you're going to do it now. So we are there, and the HR department will also assist with ensuring that they get the mentorship at the level as required to assist each trainee, so there will be no fallout from the COVID situation.
Mr. Holt, you care to comment on that?
Sure. I'll approach it from two fronts. So one, our instructors, again, very similar, have to shift to a peer mentoring role. But one of the things that we noticed in April and May is our instructors were getting what we called virtual meeting fatigue. So because we said, we're going to be available to you guys 24/7, our instructors were on endless Microsoft Teams calls, and they were on video conferencing from 7 a.m. to sometimes as late as 10 p.m. and they were putting in 16-hour days, and that was wonderful to see in the first couple of weeks, but it was not sustainable. People were exhausted. They weren't their work-life balance wasn't there. So we had to retake that approach, and we had to create some discipline and some structure for our instructors to set virtual hours and blocks of time during the day, and then communicate that to learners to say, during this time, your instructor will be available, but they're not available 24/7 at your whim. But nonetheless, we still needed some resources for trainees, students, and apprentices if they needed that. So our student counseling centers created online portals for students to connect with through various forms and platforms. We also partnered with external health authorities and community agencies for well-being and mental health that were outside of our college hours. So we had to create boundaries, we had to create structure for access for coaching and mentoring related to content or related to the training, but also time for students to look after their mental well-being. And our instructors are not professionals for mental health, but we do have counselors and disability services on campus who created online methods for students to engage while they were learning from home.
Okay, Mr. Holt, another question for you. What are recommended approaches to hands-on lab or shop training remotely post the COVID?
Remotely hands-on shop training?
Yeah.
We're very careful about what we allow students to do remotely when it comes to hands-on with the tools and trade itself, primarily for a safety factor. We don't want unskilled people working with tools and working with equipment that they are not being supervised by a trained professional. So we will limit the scope of what we will allow students to do in a structured learning environment remotely and online. We will be very strategic and surgical about what we will allow them to do, ensuring what we do prepares them for the time when they come on campus. I think, to give a little more in-depth answer from what I provided earlier, some of the things that our campus is doing in addition to all the work plans and the risk assessments is we developed an app that students and staff can use when they come to campus to allow for contact tracing. So it's an app that the student fills out their name, their phone number, their email address, and they go through about 6 questions that pre-approves them to be safe to come on campus. And what that does for us, in the unlikely event, or I shouldn't say unlikely, in the event that one of our learners does or trainees does become COVID positive, we now have all the data about when they were on campus, where they were on campus, so that then we can share that information and do proper contact tracing to see where that exposure rate goes.
Okay, great. And that, I believe, is the final question that I have for the presenters. But at this time, let me invite both presenters. Mr. Holt, you can go first in bringing some closing comments, and then I'll ask Mr. Marquez. Mr. Holt?
Sure. My closing comments about being innovative and creative in a COVID world is COVID is not going away. It is part of the world's fabric now. It is part of our lives, and we can't just simply wait this out. It is an adaptive problem that requires adaptive solutions. The solutions that we created in March and April when COVID first hit Alberta and Red Deer College no longer work 2.5, 3 months later as we start to relaunch and rethink. And so our solutions and strategies must be adaptive and be flexible, and we must maintain that nimbleness in order to be able to continue to move forward as we be innovative, creative, and incubate new ideas. I think we have to re-engage government and employers and education institutions to come to the table to create those adaptive solutions. It's not up to one of those individuals alone. It's up to the three of us to work collaboratively together to properly and effectively train the next generations of people in a COVID reality world. In 3 years from now, it won't be COVID, it'll be something new. And so what we do today will prepare us going forward. But the three major parties of government, training institutions, and employers have to continue to come to the table and work on adaptive solutions that meet the needs of learners. And we have to keep the learner at the center of every decision. Everything we decide to do and everything we mitigate has to have the learner in mind to achieve that outcome of a skilled worker.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Holt. He asks Mr. Marquez now to bring some final comments.
So the old adage, the only thing constant in life is change. It's very true, very applicable to life as general, right? COVID has taught us that. Some of us have been stuck where we think it's not, but learning and continuous change is inevitable. The idea of the learning organization will apply here. We need to get our organizations in that mode of learning, continuous change, development, adaptation, right? We need to get our unions, the government together to take this change and drive it forward. The fact is, as the board said, it's not going away, but something else may come up, but we need to take it a step. So we've now moved and life will continue moving. So we need to ensure that we move and remain relevant as an organization and as organizations as a whole, right? So we have to keep learning. The learning organization will play dominance going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Marquez. And thank you all for your feedback and comments today. I would like to thank both Mr. Holt and Mr. Marquez and Mr. St. Clair for joining the NTA TVET convention and sharing their approaches to training in the workplace post-COVID-19. At this time, that brings us to the end of our presentation for this morning's session. And we will now take a break and come back to you later on for our final presentation this afternoon. Again, gentlemen, thanks for your time. Thanks for joining the NTA. Thanks for giving all your contributions, and I know it was well received.
Thanks, everyone.